Hello everyone, welcome back to Bonepile Miniatures. In this video we will continue a discussion about the Bonepile Miniatures Mixed Rule Set, which is our version of the 9th edition of Warhammer Fantasy. This is video number 3 of a series, and in this video we will be discussing the special rules, or what I like to call the keywords chapter. This is the chapter where keywords are defined and rules are specified about them. But if you have not watched videos number 1 and 2, I recommend that you watch those first before you watch this video. You can pause this one and come back to it a little later. There are some key concepts in those first 2 videos and some major changes that have been implemented by us that will make it much easier to understand this chapter. You can look for the videos about those chapters on our channel under our rule set playlist. The purpose of this entire video series is to inform people who are watching our channel's battle reports about specific rules and the way we use them to play the 9th edition of Warhammer Fantasy. We are not in competition with other versions of 9th edition. We are not interested in a lightsaber battle over what rules are the best. We are only sharing this information for the purpose of clarification and the sharing of some of our ideas. However, feel free to leave questions or comments about our rules. Many of our rules have been influenced by the Warhammer Armies Project, but we have not adopted all of their changes. And we also have many of our own rules mixed into the rule set. If you would like to study our rules a little farther, they are available on our hobby blog at bonepileminiatures.com. Look for them under the Rules Supplement tab. Now, the rules and the documents I will show you are written in a short, concise manner and are mainly intended for those who are already familiar with Warhammer Fantasy 8th edition. The document text in black is consistent with 8th edition rules, but the text in red indicates the changes that we have made. And all changes are in red regardless of whether they came from ideas from the Warhammer Armies Project or they were our own ideas. So during this discussion I will be skimming through the rules text in black and focusing more on the text in red. And those who are not familiar with 8th edition rules may need to review them to understand what is contained within these documents. And I apologize if not all guidance in these documents is completely clear. So here is page 1 of the special rules. And as you can see, this will be a very simple and straightforward video, as this chapter basically reads like a glossary. So now let's get going through them. So on page 1 we start with striking order rules. And they are the same as the 8th edition, so we won't go over them. Next, ambushers have the same rules as the 8th edition. And then the first change comes up with the animated construct rule. Now I am familiar with this rule being in the Tomb King's 8th edition army book, but the Warhammer Armies Project made it available universally for 9th edition for all armies. And it says that they are immune to poison attacks and they are unbreakable. And they also cannot march. Pretty straightforward. Next is the armor piercing rule, and that's the same as 8th edition. And then there's a new rule called aquatic. And this is to facilitate some of the new army books from Warhammer Armies Project. Some units have the aquatic special rule. And the rule says, water is considered open terrain. It can march, be steadfast, and get rank bonuses, and gets a -1 to hit bonus from missile attacks. This rule does not apply in marshes. And then the very next rule has a change as well, under breath weapons. In our club, no longer are breath weapons used only once per game. The change says, on repeated uses of a breath weapon, roll a d6. Can be reused on a 4+, and can retry each turn. That basically means you can try to use the breath weapon every turn, and there's a 50% chance that it will fire off. Okay, so the next rule is called devastating charge, and that's the same as 8th edition. The next one, ethereal, doesn't change either. But then there's a new rule called expendable, and I also picked up this rule from the Warhammer Armies Project. And it says, expendable cannot induce panic, character cannot join, and only one expendable unit per regular unit. And typically this rule applies to war beasts and swarms and other stuff like that. And I think the expendable rule is actually a really good idea. It makes a lot of sense. So after that rule we come to fast cavalry, and there is a little change on fast cavalry. It has a note that says they cannot have barding and they cannot have an armor save better than 5+, which basically means that they cannot have heavy armor. Next we come to fear. When it comes to fear, I know that Warhammer Armies Project tried to do something different here. I think they did some kind of a leadership modifier, but since we already have a revised leadership system in our rulebook, we decided not to do that. And our revised leadership system was covered in video number 2 of this series. So ultimately we decided to stick with the original 8th edition rule for fear. And then the next few rules are the same until you get to fly. So basically we stick with either the original 8th edition flying rules, or you can follow the rules explained on our separate flying rules supplement. And this is a whole separate document. And we use it all the time in our club, and we will have a video explaining this supplement available on this channel. So if you are watching this video, most likely you should be able to find our video on our flying rules. Otherwise, if you don't follow those rules, you would default to the original 8th edition flying rules. Now you can also check out our flying rules on our hobby blog, which is at bonepileminiatures.com. So after that, we get to frenzy, and that's the same as 8th edition. And then when we get to hatred, there's a small change that says that models with this rule must re-roll successful rolls for restrain. And then there's a new rule called hidden, which is something new from the Warhammer Armies Project. And it says, the model is not placed in the unit until the start of a movement phase or a combat phase, and then placed in the front rank. It cannot be the general, nor can its leadership be used. And I know that there is a model in the Bretonnian army book from the Warhammer Armies Project that has the hidden rule. It's some sort of a dog that can travel with the peasants, and it seems like a fun little option. After that is the hover rule, and that's the same as the 8th edition. Next there's another new one called ice attacks from the Warhammer Armies Project. It reads, enemy models in base contact gain always strikes last. Missiles and spells with this rule cause always strikes last until the next turn. And then models with this rule are immune to ice attacks themselves. Okay, so that was the last change on this page. The remaining rules, which are immunity, ignores cover, and impact hits, are all the same as 8th edition. So let's move on to the next page. And you can see that there's only 2 changes on this entire page. I want to draw your attention to the large target rule, and note that we stuck with the 8th edition rule for large target. And I know that Warhammer Armies Project was toying with this rule, and I can't remember exactly what they ended up doing for it, but we decided that the 8th edition rule was simple enough for us. And so that's the one that we use. The first change on this page is in lightning attacks, which was also influenced by the Warhammer Army Project. And it says that lightning attacks ignore armor saves except with natural armor. And then we'll skip all the way down to the rule of natural armor, which has a change. And this simply says that natural armor may be combined with other armor. And we thought that there was no reasonable explanation why creatures with natural armor cannot have other types of armor if desired. Note that poison attacks are the same as 8th edition. Quick to fire, random attacks, and random movements are all the same. And then on to the next page, everything is the same as 8th edition. Regeneration, 2 hands, scaly skin, scouts, sea creatures, skirmishers, slow to fire, sniper, stomp, strength bonus, strider, stubborn, stupidity and swift stride are all the same. And so now let's move on to the next page. And as you can see, this will be the last page that we will look at. So first of all, under the terror rule, traditionally, if a unit is charged by a terror model, they take a panic test. And we've added that they also must pass a leadership test to charge a terror model, unless of course they also have the terror rule. Next, Unbreakable, Unstable, and Vanguard are all the same. And then we've got a change for the volley fire. And it says that all ranks shoot. There's a -1 to hit penalty, and it cannot be done within half of the weapon's range. And I covered our reasons for this in video 2, when I said that we made volley fire less accurate because shooters don't really even aim when they do it, and their arrows are much more susceptible to wind effects when fired that way. And then this is certainly meant to be a long-range attack, and so we do not allow this to occur within 1/2 of the weapon's range. And that brings us to the end of this chapter on special rules. That went very quickly, and honestly I think that all the changes mentioned here are very minor, but also not very hard to remember. All the most common rules didn't change. Maybe expendable, fast cavalry, terror, and volley fire will come up the most often, and I'm not going to bother giving a summary in this video since it is all so minor. And so the next video in this series will be about what I call the Army Detail Rules. And that chapter covers topics like troop types, weapons, armor, characters and war machines and things like that. And maybe I could have combined that video with this one, but this is how we have the chapters arranged in our rule set. And so to keep me from getting confused, we'll stick with that format. So you have just watched video number 3 of a series about the Bonepile Miniatures rule set. We thank you for watching, and you can review these rules once again at bonepileminiatures.com under our Rules Supplement tab. And so I hope to catch you on the next video. And until then, as always, happy wargaming.